My name is Clara Bennett. I am 31 years old, and I learned early that humiliation is most devastating when delivered politely. My adoptive brother, Ethan Bennett, proved that 3 nights before the dinner, meant to celebrate his future. His message appeared on my phone while I was still at my desk, staring at a half-finished legal brief. At first glance, it seemed harmless. A small request, a minor adjustment. Just another role correction in the long performance my family had always expected from me. I was allowed to attend the dinner with his fiancée's family, but I was not allowed to introduce myself as his sister. Her father was a federal judge. Ethan said the truth would be uncomfortable. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Diane and Richard Bennett wanted to smooth things over. Diane's voice was silk wrapped around a blade. She suggested it might be better if I sat at a small table near the service entrance. "Just for tonight," she said, "so everyone can feel more at ease." She never clarified who everyone was. I didn't ask. I simply turned my phone face down on the polished wood of my desk and looked at my reflection in the dark screen. This time, the anger wasn't loud. It didn't tremble. It didn't make me want to cry. It was cold, precise, like a balance sheet finally turning red. I opened my laptop and logged into the private server that held the final version of the Meriden project, the legal reform research Ethan planned to present to Judge Harrison Hale as if he had written every word himself. My cursor hovered over the administrator settings. Then I changed the encryption key. Access denied. Locked. No way back. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like accounting. Ethan had been a high-interest debt I had been paying since childhood. Diane and Richard spent hundreds of thousands shaping him. Private schools, debate coaches, carefully curated opportunities that gave the illusion of depth. I started at community college because it was all I could afford. I worked 3 jobs. I took loans I could barely breathe under. My law degree wasn't gifted. It was carved out of exhaustion and discipline. The truth was, Ethan wasn't afraid I would embarrass him. He was afraid of comparison. He knew that if the spotlight ever hit both of us at once, the story he had sold to the world would collapse like rented scaffolding. By 3 a.m., the server was sealed, backups erased, the bridge burned. For years, loving that family had been like a subscription renewing automatically. That night, I canceled it. I canceled something else too. For 36 months, on the first of every month, $3,000 had quietly left my account to pay the mortgage on the house. Diane and Richard still called home. They had nearly lost it after one of Richard's disastrous investments. I stepped in, not because I was loved, but because I still believed love could be negotiated. That illusion expired at midnight. I reviewed my banking dashboard like a final audit. It was time for the silent architect to send her last invoice, and I would still attend that dinner. I would wear my simplest navy dress. I would sit at the small table near the service door, and I would let the room discover what happens when people try to erase the person who built the ground beneath their feet. The Metropolitan Club looked exactly the way power liked to imagine itself. Polished wood, quiet chandeliers, conversations that sounded like agreements being signed. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not because I was eager, because invisibility is easier to manage when you control your entrance. A hostess checked my name against the list. Her smile faltered for half a second, long enough for me to recognize the pattern. People always sensed when someone belonged on paper, but not in practice. Ethan saw me first. His expression performed 3 emotions in under 2 seconds: relief, irritation, calculation. Then he walked toward me with a handshake instead of a hug. "Good," he murmured, barely moving his lips. "You came." As if attendance were obedience. He turned to the nearest cluster of guests. "This is Clara," he said smoothly. "She's helping with some administrative overflow at the firm." Administrative overflow. The phrase settled on my shoulders like dust. Before I could respond, Diane appeared. Elegant, alert, efficient. She touched my elbow with the gentleness of someone relocating furniture. "We've set a place for you back here," she whispered. Back here meant a round table near the service corridor, half hidden behind a column, close enough to hear laughter, far enough to never be part of it. I sat, From that angle, the room became a stage. Richard was already performing. His laugh came a fraction too late after every joke. His posture was a degree too straight. He looked like a man auditioning for a life he had rehearsed for decades. At the center table, Ethan leaned toward Vanessa Hale, his fiancée, speaking with the quiet authority he borrowed from documents he had never written. Vanessa listened with admiration that felt painfully sincere. I wondered how long sincerity could survive inside a lie. Wine was poured. Courses arrived and disappeared like carefully timed applause. No one at my table asked what I did. They assumed. It was easier that way. Halfway through the main course, the room shifted. A subtle ripple, the kind created when gravity changes. Judge Harrison Hale had stood, tall, controlled, a man whose voice never needed to rise to be heard. He began his ritual, moving from table to table, greeting guests, offering brief toasts that felt like quiet verdicts. When he reached Ethan's table, the energy sharpened. I watched Ethan straighten, watched Vanessa glow under the approval she believed was inevitable. Then the judge continued walking, toward the back, toward me. For a moment, I considered standing. Then I decided stillness was more honest. He stopped beside my chair and studied my face with the focus of someone reading a familiar paragraph. "Ms. Bennett," he said. Not a question. Recognition moved through the room like an electrical current. "You are the author of the Meriden framework," he continued. "It is rare to encounter work that precise." Silence followed, thick, disoriented. I rose slowly, not to impress him, to allow everyone else to see me. "Thank you, Your Honor," I replied. Across the room, Ethan's smile fractured. Judge Hale lifted his glass. "To clarity," he said. People echoed the toast automatically. Habit is stronger than comprehension. But comprehension arrived quickly. The judge reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and withdrew a folder, cream-colored, official. "I had intended to discuss a funding proposal tonight," he said. "One submitted under your name." A murmur spread. He opened the document and turned it slightly so I could read the first page. My signature, or something shaped like it. My pulse did not accelerate. Shock had already been processed hours earlier, alone in my office. "This application designates Ethan Bennett as primary beneficiary," the judge added quietly. Now every eye in the room had found us. I stepped forward, taking the folder with steady hands. Paper has weight when truth is printed on it. "This is not my submission," I said. My voice carried further than I expected. "The signature is forged." The word landed like a dropped glass. Federal fraud. It did not need to be shouted. Vanessa turned toward Ethan with a confusion that was almost gentle. "Is that true?" she asked. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, looked toward Diane and Richard as if searching for stage directions. For the first time in his life, none arrived. Vanessa slid the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond caught the chandelier light once, before disappearing into her clutch. "I believe integrity matters," she said simply. Then she stepped away from him. The performance ended in silence. And in that silence, the architecture of our family finally revealed what it had always been. A facade balanced on someone else's labor. I left before dessert was served. There is a moment after a public collapse when the air inside a room becomes difficult to breathe, not because of shame, but because everyone is recalculating distance. Outside, the night felt wider. Washington's marble facades glowed under streetlights that made everything look permanent, even when it wasn't. The valet stand was nearly empty. Engines hummed in soft intervals. For the first time that evening, there was no audience. "Clara, wait!" Diane's voice broke the quiet. I turned. She and Richard were walking toward me too quickly for dignity. Their composure had dissolved somewhere between the main course and the ring sliding off Vanessa's finger. Up close, they looked smaller. Not physically, structurally. "Please," Diane said, catching my wrist with fingers that trembled despite her effort to appear controlled. "You don't understand what you've done." I studied her face, the careful makeup, the eyes trained for decades to command sympathy. For years, that look had worked on me. Tonight, it registered as data. "I understand exactly," I replied. Richard stepped forward, breath sharp with panic. "That judge, those accusations, this could destroy Ethan. It could destroy all of us. Destroy. An interesting word. Structures built on illusions rarely collapse overnight. They erode slowly, until someone stops holding the beams in place. You always fix things, Diane insisted. You always find a way. Just tell him it was a misunderstanding. Say you gave permission. Say the paperwork was preliminary. Her voice softened on the last sentence, as if kindness might still negotiate with truth. I felt something inside me loosen, not anger, release. For 36 months, I said, I transferred $3,000 on the first of every month to keep your house from foreclosure. They stared at me. They had known, of course, but knowledge and gratitude had never shared the same space in that home. I did it because I believed family meant stabilizing what was fragile, I continued. I did it because I thought if I supported the structure long enough, one day it might support me. Richard's shoulders sagged. Diane's grip tightened. Then support us now, she whispered. Just one more time. There it was. The subscription renewal notice. I reached into my bag and took out my phone. The screen lit up between us like a quiet verdict. This is the confirmation, I said, turning it so they could read. The automatic mortgage payment has been canceled, effective immediately. For a second, neither of them spoke. Reality rarely announces itself with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a notification. You can't do that, Richard murmured. I already did. Diane's expression hardened into something I had seen before, the same look she wore years ago when she first explained why my ambitions needed to be adjusted. You're being cruel, she said. The word almost made me smile. I learned from the best, I replied gently. Then I repeated her own sentence back to her, the one she had used the night she told me to sit near the service door. Sometimes it's better if certain people stay out of sight. It makes everyone more comfortable. Understanding moved across her face like a slow storm. For the first time, she realized this was not rebellion. It was accounting. A car pulled up. The valet handed me my keys. Behind me, Diane began to cry. Not loudly, not theatrically, just enough to mark the end of a long illusion. I drove away without looking back. 3 months later, my office overlooked the same city that had once watched me sit at a table no one wanted. Sunlight moved across polished floors. Files were stacked in orderly confidence. On the wall hung an appointment letter signed by Judge Harrison Hale, welcoming me into a role I had earned long before anyone chose to recognize it. Ethan's case was still winding its way through the system. Newspapers described it as a cautionary tale about ambition without substance. Diane and Richard had sold their house. They now lived in a smaller rental across town. Occasionally, distant relatives informed me they still told the story differently, that I had abandoned them, that success had changed me. Perhaps it had. Success, I discovered, was simply the moment you stopped asking permission to exist. One evening, as the city lights began to flicker on, I stood by the window and remembered the small, round table near the service corridor. The place where I had finally understood something essential. The person pushed to the side is not always powerless. Sometimes she is just building her own foundation in the dark, waiting for the day the lights come on.